Welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses with me, Glenn Schroeder, and once again, Callum Wright joining me as co-host. It has been a week dominated by food shortages and fuel shortages in the news, but the big talking point, Callum, is the lack of wins and another shortage in defeat there for Aberdeen, now 8 without a win. Quite concerning, but do we need to trust the process?
For the time being, it's very, very concerning, but I really am trying to tell myself it's early days, you'll need time, all the players will need time, we still might need another couple of windows before they get things right. But for the time being, it's not very pretty viewing.
No, it's not. And, you know, that run, like I said, 8 without a win marks our worst run since Mark McGee was in charge in 2010, when it was kind of the same start of his tenure. And I think there was a stat at the weekend showing that in Stephen Glass's first 20 competitive games, he sits bottom in comparison to all previous Aberdeen managers. But stats are like miniskirts, as another former Aberdeen manager once said, and you can dress them up however you like. And I think we did see in spells, specifically in the first half of Sunday's defeat to St Mirren, that we can play brilliant football and cause teams loads of problems. But unfortunately, what we've seen countless times before this season, defensively, we're still looking very, very, very vulnerable.
100%. We can cause teams problems, but equally, if not more so, we can cause ourselves problems. As we seem to be seeing week in, week out. But you're right, there was sort of spells of some good, attractive football. I think I should say we took both goals well. We took one of the goals well. The other one was a bit, but we got there in the end. But it's such a concern that we seem to be leaking so many at the back. And it's not just, we seem to be handing teams these goals. It seems to always be defensive or otherwise goalkeeping, perhaps, errors. Something needs to be done. I don't know what, but it doesn't seem to be getting any better, only worse, really.
Yeah, and I think that is the concern, is that, okay, in this game, and we will get into the game shortly, that there was a red card which did have a massive influence on the game, but we aren't helping ourselves. We're almost defeating ourselves with some of these goals in the manner that we're conceding. So we'll get into the game and we'll take a look at the team news, and it was quite an attacking team, I thought. Refreshing to see, obviously, Ryan Hedges back fit again, taking the place of Austin Samuels. Maybe a bit of surprise that we didn't line up with both of them. Teddy Jenks, I was going to mention him on this podcast if he didn't play, become maybe a bit of a forgotten man in recent weeks after the arrival of Matty Longstaff from Newcastle. He came in place of Funso Ojo, who missed out altogether, and Johnny Hayes returning to the starting lineup in replace of Jet, who was retired to the bench for this game at the start. What did you make of that initial lineup, Callum?
I thought it was a very attacking lineup. I was happy with that. I was very glad that Hedges came back in. But I do agree that I think it was harsh on Samuels. I think he's played very well in the spells that we've seen, and perhaps that knock still may be bothering. Obviously, he had to come off after an hour previously, but hopefully he might come back in against Celtic. I don't know what they'll be thinking in terms of that, but it was a positive lineup, and I was thinking positively, thinking surely we can't cock this up once again. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. Interesting about Teddy Jenks. It is weird. He does seem to sort of come in, float about for a bit, and then he's sort of forgotten about. But we'll remember him this time. Still a young boy, it would seem.
Yeah, and interestingly, Matty Longstaff, that's another game without an appearance for the on-loan Newcastle midfielder. Although maybe given the situation that developed later on in the game, he might make an appearance on Sunday against Celtic when they come to town. The game started in maybe a bit scrappy fashion, but Aberdeen, mustered the first real opportunity. Callum, we spoke a lot of David Bates and how well he plays with the ball from the back and looks to get the ball forward. And it was him with an excellent ball over the top to release Teddy Jenks. And that was kind of maybe a part of also Teddy Jenks' game we haven't seen in recent certainly in the games he's played so far for Aberdeen, I thought he looked more of an attacking threat on Sunday. And he pulled the ball back for Christian Ramirez, but two St Mirren defenders got there well in time to snuff out his opportunity, but the ball broke for Johnny Hayes, who tried to take the shot first time, and Jack Anik saved well. And maybe thoughts on Johnny Hayes could have maybe taken a touch to steady himself or move the ball past the keeper before shooting?
I think he perhaps could have, but we've seen it before when Hayes gets a shot off quickly previously, and then Ramirez taps it in, but that didn't happen this time. I'm just glad you said Anik correctly. That's the main thing. But I think it was a good save from Jack Anik. It was good to see Jenks breaking from midfield a little bit more than perhaps we've maybe seen, and getting up in support. That was probably the role he was given. So it was good to see he was carrying that out for the time being. I would have liked to have seen Hayes perhaps compose himself a little, but it's not something Johnny Hayes seems to tend to do. He likes to let fly as soon as possible. And unfortunately, Anik pulled out a good stop. It wasn't to be.
Wasn't to be, but it just showed some good attacking intent. And I think throughout that game, the runs from midfield from both Jenks and Hedges were exciting. And I think Christian Ramirez linked well with both of them. And I thought Christian Ramirez, second half, which we'll come on to, is maybe a different story. But first half, he looked so much more livelier than what we've seen in recent weeks. There seemed to be a better understanding with both Jenks and Hedges, respectively. And yeah, just something that has definitely been lacking when I think back to both the St Johnstone and Motherwell games.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think he looks sharper. As you say, there seems to be more understanding with those two, which is encouraging. Hopefully that will carry on going forward. It's what we want to see. It's what we saw when he first came in, and we all got very excited and said that he scores all the time. So hopefully he can pick that back up, and we can see him sort of kick on now that he's got a couple of goals again, and hopefully he will start scoring all the time once again.
Yeah, and I think his post-match comments were very interesting. He said he would rather not score if it meant that we won the game compared to scoring and we end up on the losing side. So yeah, certainly a frustrated figure come full time. But St Mirren got their first real chance of the game when a free kick was not really executed very well from a St Mirren perspective, but the second ball was floated into the box, and Eamon Brophy could have maybe taken the ball down and controlled it, but I don't really know what he was thinking, and unfortunately we managed to kind of prevent any dangerous situation there. But David Bates maybe caught out a little bit. He was not quick to get out of defence there. A warning sign that was going to come in a few minutes later wasn't really heeded there, was it?
No, I think that was a sign of things to come for David Bates that game, unfortunately. And yeah, unfortunately, he didn't learn from that mistake. I thought, though you mentioned Brophy there, he looked quite lively against us. But I think in recent times, he's maybe not so much, but he has now. And but it is a concern from David Bates. I thought we looked a lot better with him in defence over Declan Gallagher previously. And then now maybe not so convinced. He didn't cover himself in glory, but it's early days still. He's still sort of probably getting to match sharpness after not being involved with Hamburg for so long. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for now. Yeah,
and we're in a strange situation. The way this is edited together by Calum, who obviously does a very seamless job with all that, but we are actually recording, myself and Calum, this review on Tuesday, and I spoke to Colin Watt for the Celtic preview section, which you'll hear later on in the show last night on the Monday, and he actually felt that David Bates was to blame, or had a portion of blame in all three goals, Callum. And for all that he does well with the composure on the ball, and I think certainly adds a bit more composure, maybe confidence as well to the back line in terms of his ball playing ability. I don't know if what you did touch on there about his lack of matches with Hamburg recently, was that a factor in some of the goals we conceded? Although I think when we do go 1-0 down to Connor Ronan's strike, the on-loan Wolves player playing for St Mirren, I think though Joe Lewis has got to take as much to blame as David Bates for not stepping up quickly.
Yeah, I think in that for that goal, probably equal blame there. It's frustrating because we all know how well Joe Lewis can be played and how good he can be, and I don't know what's going on with him right now. We obviously for a lot of time it was the captain's armband's too heavy. Now the armband's gone, and now it's losing the captaincy affected him. It's interesting, but I think with that goal, probably equal blame. But you mentioned that perhaps you don't know how much David Bates's lack of match sharpness has an effect. I think perhaps it will take him a little while to get back up to speed. I think it's probably being generous in saying that in that particular goal it had an effect, but it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think obviously this is, I was listening to the other regular Aberdeen podcast that's out there. There's two of us that produce podcasts on a regular and consistent basis. The guys at the ABZ football podcast were, making an interesting point about Joe Lewis, about whether or not you feel that maybe he's being the victim of his own recent success, because I think the fact that he's being scapegoated is slightly harsh, because there are other players that we need to maybe take a look at. But certainly on Sunday's game, the first goal and definitely the third goal, there's for me question marks around Joe's part in those goals. But what are your thoughts on that comment about whether or not he's a victim of his own success?
I suppose I'd probably agree. I think we do expect a very high level. I think for a while Joe was probably the best goalkeeper in the league, probably prior to Al McGregor's return. And I think, I suppose we are still expecting those levels week in, week out. I think there has been maybe a catastrophic demise, maybe be a bit too harsh, but there has obviously been a dip in form, perhaps a dip in confidence as well. I would be expected to come with that, which is a bit of a concern. But I think we all just want to see the confident Joe Lewis back again, that we all know and grew to love. Which is, it seems a far cry now. It seems long gone, which is a bit of a concern. Yeah, maybe it'll come back.
It is concerning, and I think it's also maybe what we harked back to last season. We saw Gary Woods playing for some of the games when Joe Lewis picked up that rib injury, which he did against United in the Scottish Cup defeat. And I just wonder if Joe Lewis is not as confident a ball player, let's say. Obviously his job is to keep the ball out of the net, but you see in the modern game a lot of these days that the goalkeepers have got to be good with the ball at their feet. And this season especially, I've not had much confidence when the ball is played back to Joe Lewis. He just looks very unsure. He does the simple things as a goalkeeper very well, but when he's asked to maybe get the ball back and then spread the play, it just doesn't work out. Maybe we need to just go back to the simple stuff for Joe Lewis. But if this is the style of football that we are looking to play, where we need almost, I don't really want to call him a sweeper keeper, because he's not exactly roaming that far forward yet, but there have been calls for a change of goalkeeper. But ahead of a game against Celtic, do you take out one of your most experienced players and trust Gary Woods? Now, we've gone and loaned Tom Ritchie out to Huntly, and Gary Woods obviously didn't even make the bench for the game against St Johnstone due to injury. So that's a risk looking ahead to that game on Sunday, is if you did want to change things up in your goalkeeper position, how fit is Gary Woods in the end? And when someone's confidence is possibly as low as Joe Lewis's is right now, how much do you dent that further by dropping him for such a big game when we are on such a poor run of form?
Yeah, I don't think ahead of the game it would be the time to do it, even if Gary Woods was fit. It is something I mentioned when we did make Gary Woods a permanent signing, that I thought perhaps if things don't go Joe Lewis's way, then it would surprise me if Gary Woods came in being more capable, probably with his feet, even though he's less capable as a shot stopper than Joe Lewis. But I don't think now's the time. I think going into the Celtic game, there's been enough chopping and changing with the defence, and the defence looks unsure enough as it is, let alone with them changing the goalkeeper. I don't even know if he would be fit. And I think then perhaps going into the international break is a chance maybe for Joe Lewis to regroup, gather himself, have a good couple of weeks training, and hopefully start to build that confidence again coming back off the international break ahead of a very important run of games.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully going into that run of games and an international break with a bit of confidence from hopefully a successful result against Celtic at the weekend. But when you go 1-0 down after 13 minutes, I don't know about you, but I certainly thought, for fuck's sake, here we go again. It was no real surprise that we didn't keep a clean sheet, but I was really looking to see how we reacted to that early setback. And I think we went about the business very well. I'm going to say I think it was a soft free kick that we got. The Calvin Ramsey ultimately delivered an excellent ball. Ramirez gets his head on it. So Mirren, from their point of view, they definitely didn't defend the ball well, and we got that break of the ball when the header goes in off Scott Brown's the back of his ankle, and we equalise 1-1. That bit of luck that we desperately needed, given the run of form that we'd been on.
It wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty at all, but it was the sort of goal we did need, especially not only in that game, but given the run of games we've been on, where the amount of times the ball's flashed across goal and no one's quite got there to tap it home. It's about time we got a spawny goal. Can't imagine it's how Scott Brown would have envisaged his first Aberdeen goal, but we'll take them. We needed it. Unfortunately, it didn't really matter for much in the long run, but at the time it gave us a little bit of hope. And it was about time something like that went our way.
Yeah, absolutely. It was much needed, that bit of luck, and it really seemed to spark Aberdeen into life. And we followed that up with a chance for Teddy Jenks. Played through, and Marcus Fraser, who's going to have a lot of involvement in this game one way or another, got back to make an excellent defensive tackle from a St Mirren point of view. I do think, though, Jenks could have done better getting a shot off a little bit earlier. I know on commentary there was maybe questions about whether or not he could have squared it back for Ryan Hedges, who was, of course, running into the box. I think that angle was a bit too tight, but do you think Jenks could have done a bit better with that opportunity, or do we just have to commend the defending from Fraser?
I'd like to say Jenks could have done better, but in fairness, I think Marcus Fraser, obviously said he was very much involved. He did defend well. And to be fair, looking at that St Mirren team, and the same happened against St Johnstone, I think I'll admit now, I got far too overexcited with how good I thought we were compared to the rest of the teams in the league, because looking at them, they are good sides, and Marcus Fraser is obviously a very good defender. I think in that particular instance, we've got to commend him rather than having a go at Teddy Jenks, because I'm sure we will do that later on.
Yeah, and what did you make of Teddy Jenks? We'll focus on his first half performance so far. He picked up a yellow card for a tackle on Marcus Fraser, who we just commended. And I think you have to commend his acting in this role, because he definitely made sure Willie Collum knew that he was maybe trodden on, if at all, and made sure that the yellow card was dished out to Teddy Jenks. But from an Aberdeen point of view, and certainly the way Teddy Jenks has played, I kind of felt he was a bit of a ghost in previous appearances. He did score his first Aberdeen goal at Livingston, but I didn't think he really did much overall in that performance. I thought he was much more involved on Sunday and looked a lot more lively, especially going forward. What was your thoughts on him and that booking? Did you think it was?
Soft booking, 100%. I think it's a shame, because obviously it led to the red card that we'll come on to. But I do agree that he seemed to be more involved. He seemed to be breaking from midfield, getting up in support more often, which I think is sort of the role he was brought into play. That's what I certainly thought anyway. And it was promising. It was a promising 45 minutes from him. He did seem more involved. His link-up play, as you've mentioned, was very, very good with Ramirez. Hopefully, going forward, that is sort of the performance we can see more of, and less of the maybe naive challenges when you're on a booking. But as I said, we'll get to that. But obviously that means you'll have to miss out on a game or two, and we'll see how he does when he comes back in.
Yeah, and I suppose it opens up the space for another player to come in and impress. Funso Ojo, who has been filling in the midfield, obviously missed out on Sunday. I haven't actually heard if that was injury related or what. So, if he is not going to be fit for Sunday, there is an opportunity. Matty Longstaff, came in for a couple of games and missed out. Dylan McGee, we've not seen him for a couple of times so far this season. I noticed on Twitter last night there was talk of him supposedly having COVID. I don't know how true that is. Obviously, you can't take everything you read on the internet as fact. I haven't seen it confirmed by the club, so we'll take that with a pinch of salt. But if he has, maybe he's still working his way back to full fitness. But we did, of course, see him on the bench on Sunday. And Niall McGinn, of course, getting his call up to the Northern Ireland squad despite no involvement again for Aberdeen. Pretty impressive going, I have to say. But Aberdeen, impressive again from set pieces. We talked about it last week about Alan Russell. There had been some murmurs about what his involvement the club was with the poor set pieces. And for those of you that maybe listen to Stephen Glass on the Graham Hunter podcast, an excellent interview. He said Alan Russell, yes, he is a set piece specialist, but he has been brought in as an assistant manager, not just to work on set pieces. And in that interview with Graham Hunter is an excellent clip about the Breedle Blick goal that we scored and how it was only worked on the night before, pretty much the last training move. A really, really good story from Graham Hunter there. So if you haven't listened to that, obviously after this episode, go back and check it out. But again, that man Marcus Fraser involved. Johnny Hayes broke down the left very well, showed that burst of pace despite his age, having the beating of Marcus Fraser, who had a brilliant rugby tackle on Johnny Hayes, and then Calvin Ramsey. We know so much. And we've seen so often this season how good his delivery can be. And yeah, he put it on a plate for Christian Ramirez, and what a header, especially the angle that Sky had from the camera coverage showed just how good a header that really was from the American number 9.
100%. It was a fantastic ball from Calvin Ramsey, as we know he's capable of. And on Calvin Ramsey, actually, just before I forget later on, towards the end of the game, one of the very few players playing with a bit of urgency. So I'd like to commend him on that, and it's such a young age as well. But no, fantastic ball, great header from Ramirez. It's sort of ones that just sort of goals that just look amazing. Again, unfortunately, it didn't amount to much in the long run. I do have to question St Mirren's defending, however, on that set piece. As much as perhaps our movement and the perfect pinpoint ball from Calvin Ramsey will have had an effect on it, still questionable from them.
Yeah, although I suppose from a St Mirren point of view, if there are any St Mirren fans tuning in to hear our disappointment at the result, they'll maybe also want us to point out, well, I'm going to point out how excellent it was from Scott Brown. Blocking, I think it was Marcus Fraser who was picking up Christian Ramirez initially. We said he's been heavily involved in this game. And again, he did pick up a booking in that incident on the foul with Johnny Hayes, which we'll maybe come back to later on in the show. But Scott Brown, you could tell it was straight out of the Alan Russell playbook. Scott Brown using himself as a blocker to help Christian Ramirez get free. And so you could maybe say from a St Mirren point of view, they'll be looking for a foul, but I know from behind the goal, there's maybe a bit of Jamie McGrath. And certainly in the slow-mo, it looks like he's just admiring the header, and why not? Because, what a header. But, good bit of tactical nous there shown from Scott Brown to block the runner.
Same thing you expect from it. It was a bit like watching basketball, setting screens and everything. I can't wait for the Miami Heat to be back, because watching Newcastle and Aberdeen is miserable. But it's the type of thing you would expect from Scott Brown, such an experienced player. It's interesting you mentioned Jamie McGrath. The angle from behind does look like he could have definitely done something to prevent that going in. But he did sort of admire it and just watch it go by. And I mean, thanks, Jamie, but I feel like he definitely could have done something about it.
I know, I like how you refer to the NBA and I refer to it as Alan Russell's playbook. We do our American sports here.
I know.
But it's certainly been more enjoyable than watching Aberdeen in recent weeks, but let's hope it slowly improves. But we did see building on obviously coming from behind and taking the lead 2-1. You're thinking at this stage, half an hour into the game, I'm writing down my notes thinking, me and Callum are going to have a lot of positivities to speak about, because the negativity is coming, don't you guys worry about that. But we did continue to build on that momentum from gaining the lead, free-flowing attacking football and balls into the box. The one of note was the one where Lewis Ferguson gets his head on it. It goes inches past the post, but Ryan Hedges is flinging himself at the ball and unfortunately can't connect. Seems to be the story of our season so far, with these so near but yet so far. But I think that spell between going 2-1 up in half time is what we've got to remember and maybe keep in the back of our minds when there is all this negative talk going on social media. We are playing the right style of football. It's just not clicking yet. And, had that chance, gone 3-1 or we'd taken some of the earlier chances. We spoke about that Teddy Jenks opportunity, Johnny Hayes' lack of composure, if you want to call it that. There's just these fine margins not falling our way. And if we get the proverbial break of the ball, that old football cliche, things could be also different as we go into the game of the weekend.
That's the type of things I am trying to remember, in that it's very early days. It will take time for these things to click, and hopefully we will get there, obviously, with more additions too, come January, come the end of the season, providing Stephen Glass is still in charge, obviously. But I think you are right. You are right to highlight that. There was times during the game where we did play very, very well, and particularly that spell you've just mentioned, where we did look very, very fluid, free-flowing, attacking football, creating chances, obviously, unfortunately not taking them and probably killing the game off. But, we've got to look at those positives, I guess, when there is so very few, it would seem right now.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the thing, we've got to trust the process that's being put in place. We might not have trusted the recruitment process of Stephen Glass himself, but at the end of the day, he's the man in charge. He has been backed by the manager. Is 7 games really a fine amount of time to judge Stephen Glass on? Because as we said last season, we can't really judge him on what he did last season. That wasn't his squad. And it's quite interesting. We're speaking about, we're playing Celtic at the weekend. They're also going through the same sort of transition, different philosophy being implemented. I know philosophy is maybe not a word that many people like being brandished about when it refers to football, but Celtic fans they've also got the murmurings on social media of them not being happy with what Ange Postecoglou is doing. But both these managers have been backed, and I suppose the only difference is we've had a very favourable run of fixtures up until now, and that's maybe where the worry is coming from the Aberdeen support. I can kind of see it on that element, but I can also see we're doing a lot of things right, and if we can sort out our defence,
big if.
We might, big if, but if we can sort that out, then hopefully we can start seeing an improvement, because it's not for the lack of trying just now, especially, in terms of shots and chances created, because when you think back to previous seasons, we were really struggling on that front, and you were like, well, we really should have been, creating more, and we've got players, a higher caliber of players to do that. And I think, we have missed Ryan Hedges. We saw the impact he brought to us in terms of a team going forward. And I just think if both him and Austin Samuels can maintain their levels of fitness for the rest of the season, we could have, we could be scoring a lot of goals, but we do really need to work on ourselves defensively. I don't know what your overall thoughts are on these whole glass out, tweets that are going around.
I think a lot of them are probably taking the piss somewhat, but for those that are serious, I do think that he should be afforded more time. It's never going to be an instant success after it had gone so stale with McInnes, and obviously we weren't playing attractive football whatsoever. We weren't even creating these chances at times, and still looking not great defensively also at times. But I think he does need to be afforded this time. Managers need transfer windows. They need to be able to assemble their squad to how they would like. I think football managers are often not given a lot of time, and they should be more in football. So I don't know who we would be to get rid of him after such a short amount of time, when there is some positive signs. There is. I think you're right about the Ryan Hedges and perhaps Austin Samuels thing as well. I'd like to see those two and Ramirez given a good run of games together, those three, and see how that goes. Because Austin Samuels, we've seen him in his short time here creating a lot of good chances, for Aberdeen. And Ryan Hedges, we all know what he's capable of too. And I think given the right service, Ramirez can be the man that scores all the time. It is, but you do mention the other end. That is a massive concern. I don't know how we go about sorting that, in all honesty. I don't have the answers for that. But goodness me, we do need to, because it's costing us.
Yeah, ultimately costing us big time. And, I think as well, the media will be loving the fact that Aberdeen fans are turning on the manager already. The West Coast media especially, they'll take great pride in seeing Aberdeen suffering. And, maybe we just need to create that bit of siege mentality. It's us against the rest. Everyone else wants to see us fail. We know ourselves how much Michael is enjoying us not winning come Saturday or Sunday when we get a WhatsApp from him saying how pleasing it is that we're falling further behind his Hibs team. I know that other Hibs fans that tune in on YouTube also like to let us know that we're falling further behind in the comment section there on YouTube as well. But do you think as well, given the fact that both Hibs and Hearts have maintained their unbeaten start to the seasons over the course of the weekend, Motherwell winning again, as have Rangers, pulling further away, does those sort of results also increase the pressure from the fans? From our fans, really. I
think so, and also from the media, because we all know the media did not like to give Derek McInnes a hard time, and they will do so with Stephen Glass because he's not one of their buddies. But I suppose looking at those results, I think it increases frustration, maybe not pressure from the fans. I think it increases the fans' frustration, as was the case last weekend too. But there will be times where these teams will drop points, Celtic, Rangers, Hibs, Hearts as well. This won't last forever. They won't go on like this, let's be honest. Hibs will have a breakdown. They will. Hibs will have every team throughout the season will have a spell of results where they will drop those points. And it'll come. Maybe ours has come a bit too soon than we'd have liked, but it will come, and we just hopefully need to be in a position where we can capitalise this and get through this this bad run of form. But perhaps these tricky fixtures could maybe show what this team's actually made of. Maybe. I'm trying to look at the positives here. And
I think it's a good point. And I think you're right. It's maybe not pressure, it's frustration. That's a good word choice there, Calum. And I think, Richard Foster last night on Sports Sound said, maybe the only person I've heard in the media so far sticking up for Stephen Glass, saying that things, he's actually getting his message across to the players. He's obviously feeling the players are doing what he's asking them to do. If the players weren't responding to what he was wanting, or the style wasn't working, okay, the results aren't coming, which I know people are going to jump on the bandwagon and say, look, it doesn't matter what he's saying, the results aren't there. But if the players are at least responding to what Stephen Glass is trying to do, that's obviously half the battle, because you don't want to lose a dressing room at this early stage of the season. So it's certainly something to keep abreast of. But look, if we can beat Celtic at the weekend, we go above them in the league. So it just shows the league is also, we're only 7 games into the season. Yes, we do have a daunting set of fixtures coming up after the international break and I think it's only daunting based on our current run of form. If we'd beaten St Mirren and not lost to both St Johnstone and Motherwell respectively, would we be still saying it's daunting going into these games because we'd maybe picked up a bit of decent form and maybe had a win or two in there? It doesn't suddenly become daunting because wins breed confidence and momentum. We don't have either of that going into certainly Sunday, and that's why I think Sunday becomes imperative for both. And I suppose Celtic fans may be tuning into this as well ahead of the preview section with Colin coming up will also think the same from their point of view, because it's equally the same. They're on a poor run of form and they'll be looking to respond in the same way. So interesting to see how it goes, but I suppose we need to cover the thoughts on Stephen Glass because look, everyone has their opinion, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Noises get louder, the worst form continues, but look, we've got to you stick at it and let's hope it improves sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
We did think, though, at half-time on Sunday we would be talking positively, not kind of what we've just touched on there over the last few minutes, Callum. But we didn't really start the second half particularly well, giving away a free kick that Joe Lewis, for his confidence, for all he maybe didn't cover his self and glory in the first half, saves really well. A really good reaction save from the Tanzer free kick.
Mm-hmm. I think it shows that there's obviously still that quality keeper in there in Joe Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
He pulls off those stops. I think this is that time the confidence is lacking, but it shows he is capable. It's still in there somewhere. We just need to get that confidence out there. And hopefully we can see that more often, and we can see him sort of playing the way we know he can. And even if without the ball at the feet, we know he can't play very well, which is a concern.
Yeah, and I suppose the game's real talking point or turning point, and we should maybe say, is the red card for Teddy Jenks. When on a booking, he goes lunging into a tackle very needlessly. I was quite surprised by the post-match questioning from Rob McLean, I think it was, that was doing that, saying, asking Stephen Glass if he thought it was a red card. Because at one of the replays, I thought he could have quite easily got shown a straight red. I think it was the very last replay with the way he kind of stands on the ankle, top of the foot. But is that a bit of naivety, or something you mentioned earlier in the episode there from Teddy Jenks, or is it just a bit of frustration? It lost possession. He's desperately trying to win it back.
I think it's a combination of the both. I think if that Scott Brown loses possession, he has the experience to know the sort of situation he's in and doesn't go and put in such a silly challenge. But with Teddy Jenks being, what is he, still 19 years old or 20 years old? He's still a young player, gaining experience. And there obviously is that naivety there, which was shown. I think, to be fair, it was a harsh booking in the first place for the first yellow card. I don't think there's any question about the second, and as you're right, it could have been a straight red. But I think I don't want to judge him too harshly, as much as it probably did cost us the game. It was silly. It was nothing more than that. He's 19 years old. He'll learn from that. What else can you do? Just move on.
Thing is as well, right, when he gets sent off, we're winning the game. It's not like people could look at it and say, look, the red card cost us the game. He was sent off after 50 minutes, 52 minutes, and we're 2-1 up away from home, and Stephen Glass looks at it. We've got experienced players on the pitch. I'm looking at Lewis Ferguson as your experienced player, Scott Brown. You could even argue, Ross McCrory, David Bates, Joel Lewis. These are all experienced players. Johnny Hayes as well was still on the pitch at that time. You're looking at players to step up and have a bit of responsibility, take a bit of ownership on the situation really and what's happened. And I remember listening to the commentary of the game, and they said, Declan Gallagher might be getting ready to come on. I just feel Stephen Glass didn't react to the red card. Jim Goodwin reacted immediately, brought on Curtis Main, which I immediately had a sense of inevitability about. But did that show Stephen Glass's inexperience by not reacting to the red card? Or was there a bit of the experienced players should have stepped up and taken responsibility on the pitch?
I think a combination of the both. I think the players you mentioned, especially sort of look at Scott Brown, Johnny Hayes in particular, they perhaps should have stepped up with a bit more responsibility from on the field, but equally off the field. Stephen Glass perhaps should have reacted quicker. I suppose that's something we've got to expect as well, given it's his first proper managerial role, that these things will come with experience. Perhaps is that naivety from him there too. I think it's a good point you raised about Declan Gallagher. Obviously, there's been question marks over his performances lately, but I think perhaps bringing his experience in from perhaps putting him in the centre of the defence, and also maybe pushing McCrory into midfield to shore things up would have benefited.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say.
Yeah.
You've lost a midfielder, but you've got a midfielder sitting at centre back, and you've got a centre back sitting on your bench. Just swap it around. You might lose a bit of the support for Christian Ramirez, but you're still kind of maintaining that amount of players in midfield. So hindsight's a wonderful thing. It's the second time we've managed to do that on the show. Same when we said about Austin Samuels last week. Frustrating again, but yeah, is that inexperience? And Christian Ramirez referred to it himself in the post-match, saying that teams have won with 10 men before, and maybe we just did drop the head slightly, and if we'd held on for 10 minutes, we could have maybe seen the game out. But it's the fact that we conceded twice in that 10-minute spell, the game was gone before we knew it. And the second goal is another poor goal from an Aberdeen point of view, but an excellent goal from a St Mirren perspective. Jamie McGrath doing excellent work on the touchline to keep the ball in play. And then a brilliant through ball to Connor Ronan, the on-loan Wolves player, getting his second goal of the day. Some impact for him. Ryan Hedges, I think, loses the run of Ronan, but Ronan was very clever, fakes the shot, which David Bates has sold, and he's on his backside before Ronan cutting inside and then firing past Joe Lewis. Joe Lewis is helpless for that goal, but the desire to win the ball from Jamie McGrath and not let it go out for a throw-in is excellent. I was really impressed by him in that second half. I can definitely see why we wanted to sign him. Hibs wanted to sign him, and a host of other English Championship clubs did as well. Really stepped up and took the game by the scruff of the neck in midfield for St Mirren in that second half. But again, from an Aberdeen point of view, you've got to be disappointed the fact you lose your runner and then sold the dummy quite easily. But yeah, I just can't help but commend St Mirren for that goal.
Yeah, from their perspective, obviously, as you said, it's a good goal. As you say, also Jamie McGrath, you can see why there's interest from elsewhere, and also commend Ronan as well. He looks like a great piece of business from them on loan from Wolves. From an Aberdeen perspective, terrible goal to concede. Obviously, Ronan took it well. Don't want to take it away from him. The finish. But sold Bates the dummy, and you're just and especially in the replay, it just looks so bad from David Bates. He's just sat on his arse, not even getting anywhere near it with the block. Horrendous. But at least Joe Lewis got away with this one, so he's not to blame. But David Bates, it's a concern. But hopefully we'll see him pick things up again, and hopefully he'll bounce back, because God knows he needs to. And needs to stop sitting on his arse.
And Joe Lewis got away with not having any blame for the second goal, but the third goal.
Oh my word! Yeah, not great.
Yeah, again, excellent work from Jamie McGrath again in midfield, and that man Marcus Fraser, who was heavily involved in the first half, swung a great ball in. Curtis Main, we did say, had a sense of inevitability on it. He claimed the touch. The goal has been awarded to Marcus Fraser, though. Joe Lewis, though, mate, what are you doing? If you're coming that way, you've got to be claiming the ball or getting something on the ball. But also, what the hell is David Bates doing standing with his hand up for offside? It's such a schoolboy goal. Actually, it's probably like primary school. So embarrassing to watch.
Horrendous. I hope there wasn't a lot of English viewers tuning in to watch that and seeing that goal, because it's not a great advert for the Scottish game, as people like to say. It was, thank God Curtis Main didn't touch it. That's about the only thing I can take from it. Obviously, he still played a big part in the goal, probably putting Joe Lewis off. But Joe Lewis, come out, claim the ball, be confident, clatter Curtis Main if you need to, anything. But it was just, it summed up sort of the game and this recent run of form that we've been on, really. There was sort of a sense of inevitability that they were going to go on and win the game, but and it's probably a sort of sense of inevitability that it was going to be in that sort of fashion. Sort of typical of us, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it seems to just be Jim Goodwin's got that kind of hoodoo over us just now, and you got to commend, we try and be balanced on this show from both an Aberdeen point of view and the opposition, and fair play to St Mirren. They went for it after the red card by bringing on the striker, and they looked like a team that wanted that game more. We looked like rabbits in headlights for about 10 minutes, and ultimately it cost us the game. And unfortunately, once the game went 3-2, it just petered out, really, from an Aberdeen point of view. I don't think we ever looked once like getting back into that game. I know there was an opportunity for Austin Samuels to get through after I think it was a slip in the St Mirren defence. Unfortunately, the offside flag went up. But other than that, I don't really remember anything clear cut. And when the substitutions came about, for me, I thought the game was pretty much, you might as well blown the full-time whistle. Ryan Hedges and Christian Ramirez taken off. I don't know whether this was to make a change positively on the game. I would assume so, or if he was giving them some time off ahead of Sunday. Austin Samuels and J. Emmanuel Thomas coming on for the last 20 minutes, and I just thought, well, they're not going to do anything.
I think Samuels I could sort of understand, but that would be if he was going to play with Ramirez rather than with Jack, because I mean, Samuels looks more like he's going to create something rather than create something for something else rather than do something on his own, a moment of magic kind of thing. And Jet, when you're chasing a game, is not the type of player you like to bring in. I don't like to use the word, but luxury player probably does spring to mind. And yeah, the game did peter out, really. The only other chance I can really remember, I think, was Ferguson on like sort of the volley or maybe half volley that went wide from sort of the edge of the area. And that was it. And then it sort of descended into chaos towards the end, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And I think that's a frustrating thing, though. Like, Jet's not the player you want to bring on when you're chasing a game, because you can't even chase a player effectively. It's so painful watching him try and chase back, when we're defending. It really is. But yeah, defended into chaos. A real lack of discipline started to creep into our game. I haven't even added up how many cards we got in that game, but Johnny Hayes, we talked about experienced players, needing to take a bit of responsibility. Absolute disgrace from him, that tackle. And when Willie Collum's the referee, I'm really surprised he didn't send Johnny Hayes off.
Well, I mean, you think back to the one he got sent off for against Mikael Lustig at Pittodrie a few years ago, if you remember that. Sort of similar to that, thankfully, no contact made there, going flying in. I don't know what he was thinking at all. That was the type of thing you would expect from someone maybe like Teddy Jenks, Calvin Ramsey, Jack McKenzie, one of these players with no experience, but well into his 30s now, Johnny Hayes, hundreds of appearances, and we're still, I guess, obviously it's very late on, but they shouldn't have given up by that stage, and he's just gone in flying in like that. Very stupid, and also potentially dangerous as well for the player on the receiving end. Thankfully, no contact made.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's a really poor look, because it just kind of obviously summed up the frustration of the way the second half went, but it's when it's your experienced player, I suppose. You obviously can't accept that any player, recklessly diving in like that, but you could maybe have a bit of sympathy if it is one of the younger players. But when you want your experienced players to kind of lead by example, and that's the way that they're taking the game. But I know, we've had lots of comments previously on the shows, whether it's been on YouTube or Twitter, which is at RTG_podcast. People asking whether or not that kind of lack of discipline from Stephen Glass with his regular bookings leads down to the players. And I don't think you can really link the two in this incident. It's just players seen red in terms of, like, okay, not physically by the referee, but that frustration's just got the better of them on this occasion, and they've just tried to take it out on the player. Really poor from Johnny Hayes. Thankfully, from an Aberdeen point of view, he's not been sent off, so he is available for the weekend. But it just kind of summed up what was just a dreadful end to the game, and I'm just glad I decided to watch the Formula One live before putting myself through the Aberdeen game, because it wasn't pretty come full time.
It wasn't at all. And I'm also somewhat glad that I cocked up by being in Glasgow and then trying to buy a ticket on the Friday, then going, the only options to pick up from Pittodrie. Well, I can't go. Brilliant. So I'm sort of glad that happened. I didn't waste my time going to Paisley instead of watching it in a pub. But it wasn't good viewing. Hopefully things can pick up. And I'm not confident about it, but Celtic, they're not the Celtic of a few seasons past. They're probably thinking the same thing. They're probably worried that even though we've been on terrible form, that they know they could easily cock it up. So we shall see.
Yeah, we shall. And I suppose, the ticket prices, have been a lot of talk on them. Of course, the vaccine passports at time of recording are still supposed to be put in place ahead of this game on Sunday. So interesting to see what sort of crowd we get, Calum, on Sunday, given the run of form that we're in. But £36 for a platinum ticket, it's just a ridiculous price to be charging. To watch Aberdeen, really need to look at pricing going forward for these games. I know we're trying to obviously make money back. It's up to people to decide whether or not they want to pay that or not, but I just think it's a dangerous game when you look at some of the prices being charged in Scottish football this season. You are right, though. I don't know how this game is going to go. Ange is struggling to settle in at Celtic, but also Stephen Glass is struggling at Aberdeen. I'm delighted to be joined, as we said earlier on in the episode, by Colin Watt from the State of Mind podcast to preview this game. Well, Colin, welcome back to Red Tinted Glasses. How are you getting on?
Yeah, not too bad. How are you doing, Glenn?
Yeah, football aside, which is probably the same for you, can't really complain too much.
Yeah, it's we thought all our troubles were behind us with last season, but it's still taking a while to kick off.
Yeah. Last season, when you joined us on Red Tinted Glasses after the Scott Brown news broke, we dubbed this fixture the Scott Brown Derby. I've come up with a new title for it. I'm going to call it the Transition Derby, as both teams seem to be in transition at this early stage of the season and kind of struggling to find their feet, certainly in the league anyway.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, Aberdeen's no wins in 8. Celtic are 1-4, and that's a victory over Raith Rovers. It's not been a great start for either team. When you look at it, the amount of money that both teams have spent, Aberdeen, they've probably been the most back they've been in a long, long time. Celtic, obviously, 15 out, 12 in. They're struggling heavily with injuries at the moment. It's probably the best time for both sides to come up against each other. Aberdeen, I think, always raise their game when they come up against Celtic, and Scott Brown will definitely want to make it clear that he could still play for Celtic, although the performances I've seen so far this season don't really stand up that way.
Yeah, some interesting points you raised that we'll certainly kind of dissect through this segment. As always, it's great to have you on the show, Colin, and great to have a bit of opposition insight ahead of the fixture. The game on Sunday obviously being the 12 o'clock kickoff and Sky's viewing for this weekend. Obviously talk about ticket pricing being quite high for this game, Category A. Home fans being charged a premium of £30. Colin, you were saying to me it's £30 for away fans for the uncovered section and 32 for the covered section. But Celtic make the journey up to Pittodrie on Sunday. And the last time Aberdeen actually managed to record a victory against Celtic, you were telling me, was back in February 2016, where Simon Church grabbed the winner. And there's been a lot of talking points over Joe Lewis's recent performances. Well, I'll remind you who was in goal that night. Scott Brown. No, not the midfielder, the one that had a few dodgy performances. So, it can be done. We can beat Celtic with a dodgy keeper. For those of you tuning in, I did do the bunny ears. I'm not going to go too in on Joe Lewis on this segment because it's already been done with Calum in the review of the St Mirren game. But Colin, from a Celtic point of view, no away league game win since February. Coming up to Pittodrie, where Celtic do have such a dominant record, is this maybe the sort of fixture Celtic maybe look forward to?
I mean, here's the thing. So if you looked at that record, on paper you're saying Celtic will turn up, and if they put a performance in, they should get the points, because that's the way that history tells you it goes. If you ask any Celtic fan right now, they are not confident in the slightest about going up to Pittodrie on Sunday. And to be honest, I really don't blame any Celtic fan who thinks that way, because performances away from home, they've been really, really poor. I was at Livingston, the Spaghetti ad a couple of weeks ago, and it was just so passive, it was so slow. When you look at the stats this season, Celtic are passing the ball at a higher level than any other team. They've made 588 accurate passes a game, which is like almost double what Aberdeen put in. And yet Aberdeen's 62% average possession, Celtic's 72%. They're two teams that want to get the ball down. They want to play football. They've both been dubbed Ange Ball and Glass Ball. We made a joke off air. What happens if Dominic Ball becomes a manager? Then it's Ball Ball, or as someone said, Ball Squared.
Ball Squared.
But on paper, this suggests it's going to be a cracking game of football.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't see it. I watched the Aberdeen game against St Mirren, and there just wasn't anything there that if I was an opposition fan out with Celtic, if I was a Hibs fan or if I was a Hearts fan and I'm watching that, I wouldn't be fearful coming up against Aberdeen. And it's so strange because for the last sort of 7-8 years, Aberdeen's been that third dominant force. Yes, okay, they finished fourth last season, but over the time, they were the only team to sort of push Celtic when Rangers weren't in the league.
Yep.
They're the only team to sort of consistently make semi-finals and finals. And then this kind of drop over the last 18 months has just been so dramatic. At this point, the way that St Aberdeen are playing, it could be a struggle for top six. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just think the players are there, but they're just not putting the performance in for the manager. And when you take it across to the Celtic side, Celtic are without so many of their key players that they've brought in. They're still trying to integrate a squad together. And you've got players that are playing that if you turned around and said 6 months ago, they would be your first picks, someone would say something had to have went seriously wrong.
Yeah.
So you say it's a transition derby. It is. The two teams are almost in disarray at the moment. But everything suggests it should be a cracking game of football. It just, nothing adds up just now.
Yeah. Disarray is, maybe some people tuning in think it's maybe a strong word, but I actually think that's quite a good way of describing it. And I go back to the point you make about, the possession-based football that both these sides have, started the season with. And I think another word that's kind of being used a lot this season by Celtic and Aberdeen fans is this philosophy that both Ange Postecoglou and Stephen Glass are trying to implement at their respective clubs. I know a lot of people maybe not like the word being used because don't really maybe agree with the word philosophy and what that actually means in terms of the style of football. I think it was yourself, Colin, that actually tweeted out a stat earlier in this season that Celtic had created 104 chances across a 3-game period earlier in the season. I think that was around about the time when you beat St Mirren 6-0.
Yeah, Dundee, St Mirren and the Hearts game in the Cup, 104 shots over those 3 games. Yeah,
and I look at that stat, in isolation for the 3 games and them all being at Parkhead, obviously, where you're a bit more dominant compared to away from home. But I watched the highlights of the game from yesterday. We're recording this on Monday evening, and a 1-1 draw for yourselves against Dundee United. And once again, creating plenty of chances. And I think, I said on the State of Mind, State of Scottish Football show that Celtic will probably, one of those days hit the woodwork 3 times, but creating plenty. And from an Aberdeen point of view, I suppose going into this game is that worry about how freely Celtic seem to create when we have such defensive frailties. But on the other hand, Dundee United got themselves a well-worked goal. From a Celtic point of view, you might be disappointed with the way the cross was defended and allowed in, albeit Hart with an excellent header. That really Joe Hart had nothing that he could do to stop that. But I even look back to the goal Andrew Shinnie scored. I think Celtic could have done a lot better stopping the ball in midfield. Again, probably stopping the ball into the box as well. So from a Celtic point of view, there is defensive frailties there. And I go back to the word you used there about disarray. Both teams are looking very exciting going forward. We saw that in spells on Sunday from Aberdeen, especially in the first half, how exciting we were going forward and putting some excellent balls into the box from young Calvin Ramsey. But defensively from both these sides, we're both suspect. And you're totally right. It adds up to be an exciting prospect. This could either be a 3-3, 4-4, but in all likelihood, it'll end up being a dull 0-0 now that we've said that.
Absolutely. And I think what it comes down to is there's a mix of inexperience and a mix of experience that should know better. So if I look at it from an Aberdeen perspective, I watched the game against St Mirren, and David Bates, who's a Scotland international, should know so much better than the mistakes that he made. He was basically, in my opinion, and you might disagree, he was at fault for all 3 goals.
I would say, the first goal, positioning-wise, we've discussed earlier in the episode that, David Bates should probably do a bit better. But I think the second and third goal, the second goal, he's bought the dummy, but the third goal, not for me. I don't know why he's appealing for offside, but I wouldn't put that down to him being, at fault.
I think even at that, you've got to learn to play the whistle. I mean, if you shout for the offside, you shout for the offside, but do it and continue onwards. If it is genuinely offside, the referee should, and I say should because it's Scottish football, should stop it and bring it back. But I just think it was an inexperience from David Bates, who should know better because he's not a young boy anymore. He's 25 now, 25, 26. He's got that experience of playing over in Germany. He's played at the highest level for Rangers as well. When he steps in, especially with the likes of Andy Considine being out the team, you're looking for him to kind of bring that experience in, and he should be doing a lot better. Now, when I look at it on the Celtic side, you've got someone in Carl Starfelt, who, for me, there's 2 sides of Carl Starfelt. If you whip a ball into the box, he will header that clear all day, every day. That's his meat and bones. That's everything that's good about Carl Starfelt. If you put the ball at Carl Starfelt's feet or run at Carl Starfelt, then Celtic are in trouble. And we saw it on Sunday, which is where Hart got the goal. We saw it in Europe. We've seen it every time he comes over the halfway line, he gets a nosebleed. And that really doesn't suit the way that Ange Postecoglou wants to play football. So he's been drafting in and out of the team. You've seen Stephen Welsh coming in. Stephen Welsh was probably at fault for Andrew Shinney's goal, I would say, the spaghetti ad. So the only consistent player there is Cameron Carter-Vickers. And to me, I think he's been a great addition. If he keeps up that form, I'd really hope that Celtic look to take that option to buy, to bring him in. But he needs someone alongside him who's going to consistently work with him and play to his strengths, because you need to get a centre-half partnership going, otherwise you will concede silly goals like Celtic did at the weekend. Then you've got the fullbacks. You mentioned you've got Calvin Ramsey, who, by the way, absolute star. We spoke about him the last time he came on, and we spoke about him after the 1-8 straw at the end of last season. I think he's a future star in the making. I was actually probably selfishly hoping that Celtic might put a bid in for him in the summer.
Hands off.
But he will go for big money when he eventually does leave Pittodrie. He must be the best player to come through Aberdeen's youth academy in a long time.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, Mackenzie's playing left back.
He is, yeah.
I also think he's a good player too. I think there's a really good player in there. And probably the two of them are the highlights of Aberdeen's season so far.
Yeah, and whereas Mackenzie's work kind of gets overshadowed by how excellent Calvin Ramsey's been so far this season. But totally agree. Both have been the shining lights in what has been a stuttering start, let's say, to the season, maybe apart from the early rounds of the European competitions. Yeah,
and then when you look at Celtic, you've got, and I have to hold my hands up for the first maybe 4 or 5 games. I never saw a performance coming out of Anthony Ralston like he put in those first 4 or 5 games for Celtic. Then he picked up COVID and was out for a couple of games, and he's not looked the same since he came back. Now, I don't know if that's because he's having still the effects of the disease or what it is, but he's just not looked the same player since he came back into the side. Celtic have brought in Josip Juranovic, and again, he looks a quality addition, can play on both the left and the right-hand side, played very well at Ibrox on the left, has played very well in Europe on the left, but then he picks up an injury on Sunday, and Celtic's back to at this kind of scraping the barrel. There is no one there. And when we were speaking about this off air, I was trying to put an 11 together for the team on Sunday, and you're going, well, I'll need to throw him in, and I need to throw him in, and then I'm going, there's no point in even attempting a bench, because it's a lot of young boys, and Celtic don't have the options to turn to. So that's one of the big problems at the minute, is if this 11 doesn't put in the performance, they can't turn round to the bench and say, right, we need a goal from you, or you, because it's guys like Sorrell, it's guys like Shaw, it's Beaton that's coming on, and you're hardly going to expect them to score. So this is what I'm saying about the disarray. And again, as you say, it is a strong word, but there's a lot of Celtic fans at the minute that are just kind of, a lot of fans that weren't 100% behind Ange Postecoglou's appointment are now trying to kind of, I wouldn't say force him out the door.
Yeah.
The questions have already been asked by those people. There's others on the other side of the camp which know this is a long-term project, and I would say I'm one of those who are willing to give him time because of the circumstances that are around it. But if you get a performance and you go up to Pittodrie and win, that gets the momentum back going again. And let's not lie, Aberdeen always up their game when Celtic come to time. So this is going to be a massive, massive test for Ange Postecoglou at the weekend. Yeah, and it's a couple of interesting points you pick up there, and I'm just going to touch on the last one. And first of all, you mentioned there about the kind of Celtic support being a bit split on Ange Postecoglou, and I kind of like reflect on what that's like in terms from an Aberdeen point of view, and I think it's totally kind of similar sort of vibes here in Aberdeen as well. That the support is very much split on Stephen Glass. A lot of people maybe have similar views to yourself, but from an Aberdeen point of view, where they can see what the long-term project is, and want to put their faith in the process that things will turn around. And I said tonight on the State of Scottish Football that 7 games is quite early to hit the panic button, but as football fans we all love a knee-jerk reaction to how things are going. There are certain elements of the Aberdeen support that rightly have questions over the process on how Stephen Glass got himself into the position as current Aberdeen manager. I share a lot of the thoughts and agreement to that process and whether it was as thorough as has been documented. But I also think we should, kind of stick with Stephen Glass. He deserves the support and the backing. Christian Ramirez coming out at full time saying, now is when the club needs the support most. And what bigger game to kind of have and to bounce back in than a visit of Celtic. It is a big game. Celtic like to think we raise their game when they come to town. But for you personally, what have you made of Ange Postecoglou's start as Celtic manager? It's been very difficult. I'd have to say there's definitely been positive and negatives to Postecoglou since he joined. For me, one of the big positives is actually that Celtic qualified for Europe. And some Celtic fans might not agree with that because they've said, well, what's the point in Europe this season? The concentration should be on the league. Look what's happened. Look at the squad we're in now. But it's also important to get group stage football because it brings in that additional revenue. Yourself, if Aberdeen had made the group stages of the Conference League, how much additional revenue that would have brought into the team. And it wouldn't have overly mattered if Aberdeen didn't pick up a point in that group. It's the revenue that's brought in from it. It's the European nights. It's 100%. What you kind of live for as a fan. So it was important in that aspect to get through there, and the performances against AZ were impressive, and it shows the level that Celtic can get to. But then away from home this season, there's just, I don't know, there's just something not there. When I look at the Hearts performance, Hearts obviously had a great start to the season. They're still unbeaten, so are Hibs at the time of us recording this. And they do look a good side. Now, Celtic obviously had chances in that game, and we've already spoke about the standard of Scottish refereeing, but there could have been so many different aspects to that game if referee calls were made correctly. Celtic kind of showed their frailties again, but you're talking about, when we look at it, guys like Stephen Welsh, guys like Dane Murray coming into that side, and that shows how much Celtic still have to kind of rebuild to an aspect. Okay, they've brought in 12 players. Of them 12 players, are all 12 going to be the next big thing? Are they going to be the players that come in and stake the claim for the jersey and they're the number one picks? Of course they're not going to be. But you do have to add depth to that squad. So that's not to say that Cal Starfelt's going to be a terrible signing. He might be a great squad signing and someone you can turn to for the odd game when someone's injured. But at the minute, we're relying on him. And this is the 5th game in 14 days that we'll be looking at just now.
Yeah.
It's a lot of football for players that aren't first picks.
Yeah, and that's another thing, I suppose, we're kind of, talking in general about the importance of this fixture from both an Aberdeen and Celtic point of view, given the poor run of form that both teams are on. Obviously, from an Aberdeen point of view, no wins in 8 going into this game. Yeah. Celtic doing what Aberdeen couldn't and beating Wraith Rovers to pick up their only win in 4 games so far. And it's an interesting one because fans of both sides there's murmurings, let's call it, from elements of the support, murmurings of discontent, let's say, at the appointment. And some people are getting itchy feet, and the calls are maybe starting from elements of the support about whether or not the appointments were correct. And I think this is an important fixture because you look at the start that both Edinburgh sides have made, as you said, currently unbeaten at the time of recording. Rangers sitting a point ahead of both of them. And even Motherwell, an impressive start to the season after their opening day defeat to Hibernian. These sides, I know we're only 7 games into the season, but beginning to get a bit of daylight on both Aberdeen and Celtic. And if Aberdeen can, beat Celtic on Sunday, we actually leapfrog you. Yeah. So
don't say that with too much happiness there, Glenn.
So from a Celtic point of view, alarm bells will start ringing because it's another club going above them. But from Aberdeen point of view, if we were to lose this game, that becomes 9 without a win. Not only do we fall 5 points behind Celtic, but the potential is there to fall further behind the rest of the teams there above us, with a tricky set of fixtures coming up after the international break. So from a Celtic point of view, Colin, let's look at that first. How important is this fixture for Celtic? And given that you play Leverkusen on Thursday night, again, like I said, we're recording this on Monday night, how important is it for Celtic to come through that fixture unscathed in terms of injuries? Because, again, picking up 2 at the weekend in that 1-1 draw with Dundee United, Juranovic and James McCarthy both coming off injured. You made the point there, it's going to be 5 games in 14 days going into the game on Sunday. Is it important that Celtic come through a tricky test, let's say, against Bayer Leverkusen with no injury concerns?
That has to be the main focus. When I look at it, I'm struggling to put an 11 together for the weekend that doesn't include guys that have still to make their debut for the club. That's the kind of level we're talking about. Yeah. So, obviously Leverkusen on Thursday night. It'll be another great occasion under the lights at Parkhead. The disco lights of Celtic. Love to name them. That was embarrassing against Wraith, but hey ho.
Glad you can admit that.
Yeah, I think every Celtic fan could admit it. It wasn't great. But yeah, it's getting players back in. There's a couple that are sort of on the fringes of being there, and the international break will probably help that because it's an extra 2 weeks. But when you look at Celtic's start to the season, the teams that they've had to play away from home, nobody could have given them a harder run. They've played Rangers away, they've played Hearts away, they're coming up to Aberdeen on Sunday, they've went to the Spaghetti Ad, which has always been Celtic's bogey ground. Celtic haven't won there in a league fixture since 2006. Yeah. That's how long it's been. So when you look at it, that run was very, very difficult. And I tell you what, if Postecoglou managed to pick up another 3 or 4 points here and there, Celtic fans, the ones that are already starting to sort of question it, they probably wouldn't be saying anything. Yeah. But I mean, this is going to flip. This is the kind of thing with this season. These games will flip because you expect Hearts, Rangers, Aberdeen, they'll all make the top 6. Wow. So you've still got to, well, I'm being, if you look at it over the kind of the way the Scottish football runs, they should finish top 6. Yeah. So you're going to have to play those teams at home after the split when it gets into the sort of nitty gritty of the season.
True.
So some might say that you've got the hard fixtures out the road and it gets easier from then on in. The home fixtures probably couldn't have been any easier to Celtic, with the exception of playing a very good Dundee United team, who under Tam Courts have went kind of from strength to strength after beating Rangers a couple of weeks ago. So the season will balance out on itself. But if you get the 3 points, whoever gets the 3 points on Sunday, that could be pivotal. Sorry, I'm suffering with a cold here. I'm not looking for sympathy, Aberdeen fans. It's okay.
You'll find none from us.
Oh, absolutely. And I wouldn't have expected any if I was able to make the game either. But it can be pivotal as to how the rest of the season goes. I know it's the last game before the international break, but you'd rather go in there on a high, picking up the 3 points, get into training that week after it, looking forward to the next game, as opposed to having to pick yourself back up, taking another couple of days to do that, then getting back into the mindset of this is who we've got next, this is how we need to play, this is how we need to beat them. And look, if Aberdeen go without, it'll be 9 if they don't win.
Yeah,
I can totally understand why Aberdeen fans would be asking questions. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the word you used there, confidence, is really going to be the key, because a point you made there about Celtic getting the tough fixtures out the way, and had results gone another way, there might not be as many complaints. And I suppose you could flip that to an Aberdeen perspective and say, really, I think with the exception of visiting Tynecastle, the fixture calendar up till now has been generous to Aberdeen. And I think the disappointment from a lot of Aberdeen fans, myself included, is that we've probably not picked up as many points as we as fans would have expected us to. Dropping points at home to Ross County and St Johnstone, not probably what we expected given the run of form both sides were on coming into that game. And then a defeat to Motherwell, but I suppose now in context and perspective, it's maybe understandable given the run of form Motherwell are on. And then allowing St Mirren to pick up their first win of the season there on Sunday, but again, different circumstances, with the red card and whatnot. But it is so important for Aberdeen to gain some much needed confidence, because I just said there, we've had a favourable run of fixtures. Looking after the international break, we go to Dens Park, and again, currently at time of recording, they're without a win in the league. So, we've been handing out first wins of the season to teams left, right and centre so far. So, you look at that one how you will.
Well, we still don't have an away win, so we'll take that if it's going.
Yeah, well, a venue that you've had a pretty dominant record in over the last 5 years. So we'll see how that one pans out come Sunday. But then, we host a Hibs side currently unbeaten. We travel to Ibrox and then host another unbeaten side currently in Hearts in that 3-game spell over the course of a week. Tricky set of fixtures coming up for Aberdeen, and a win over Celtic this weekend would just give so much needed confidence and lift to not only the set of fans that are been crying out for this after a recent run of poor results, but the players as well, whose efforts in recent weeks have maybe not been given the right reward. Ross County, there was a lot of effort, lots of chances created, shots off the line, and ultimately we managed to grab a point at the death. Similar, the game yesterday, we created lots of chances, maybe some will say half chances in that first half. And ultimately the game changes. St Johnstone game, didn't really do enough over the course to win. But even that Motherwell game, 14 shots on target. I think more than half of them, or even double figures, were from outside of the box and right at Liam Kelly. But the difference this season is we are creating opportunities. We've just not been as clinical as, and I think it's fair to say, as Celtic have been in front of goal this season, for a large part, certainly in the early stages. And we just need it to click. And whether that comes on Sunday, it'd be great to see. Remain optimistic. But not only do we need it to click at the top end of the pitch, we also need to solidify defensively. You mentioned, Celtic's kind of defensive frailties this season. and it was highlighted on Sportscene how well Dundee United pressed Celtic's backline. Starfelt looked uncomfortable, and it was him that, gave the ball away in the build-up to what should have been a penalty for Dundee United. You might think differently.
I'll tell you what, the actual tackle by Carter Vickers was a penalty, but there was a foul leading up to that, which, if you balance it out, but honestly though, I was surprised because it was only because the focus at the time when you watch the replays is always on that foul, right? And that is 100% a foul.
Yeah. But
when you look at it and you take it back just to the kind of, as you're saying, Starfelt giving the ball away, Starfelt was actually fouled in the lead up to that as well. So if there's going to, I'm not saying that the two decisions balance out each other. Yeah. Two wrongs don't make a right. But we've already said the standard of Scottish refereeing this season has been extremely poor. All you have to look at is Hibs and the amount of penalties they keep getting for outrageous decisions.
I know the new Rangers for the amount of penalties that they're getting this season.
I know it's not Tavernier penalty; it's a Boyle penalty or Nisbet penalty. He's
been key to many people's success in fantasy football, I'm sure, this season. But does the fact that both sides having poor defences and creative attacks, we've kind of touched on earlier in the episode here about it should create a decent spectacle for those tuning in live on Sky at the weekend or wherever you decide else to find the game. It should create a good spectacle, but will that be the case?
If Celtic start with Albion Ayeti, then Aberdeen's defenders will have the easiest shift of their life.
Especially if he's got shooting boots on that he had on yesterday.
He doesn't move. He had 13 touches of the ball yesterday, and he just doesn't move. He doesn't want the ball. You have to sort of play it to him in and around the area, and the goals he scored, they've been decent, but his movement, when you compare it to the likes of even Odsonne Edouard, and everyone said Odsonne Edouard's so lazy, his movement was 10 times that of Albion Ayeti. And Kyogo Furuhashi's just another level above that again.
Is he going to be fit enough for the weekend, Kyogo? No, that's fine.
He is back training, but I can't see Celtic taking the risk on him. Someone who might start though, and it's a bit of an unknown quantity, as I said, thrown in debutants, is Georgios Giakoumakis. And that could be a struggle for David Bates, because when I looked at that game against St Mirren, balls in the air just did not suit him at all. I think he's someone who's more comfortable with the ball at his feet. But for a centre-back, you've got to be able to clear your lines, and Bates just didn't seem to do that. Now, Giakoumakis scored 29 goals for VVV Venlo last year, and a lot of those were in the air. And the crosses that Celtic are putting in at the minute, they don't suit Albion Ayeti because he's 4'11". He's not really, but that's the way he looks. Whereas you stick a 6'1" striker up there, it's a totally different dimension for Celtic. And if he is fit enough, I think you'd have to give him the chance at the weekend.
Yeah, and I suppose the other kind of key battle that I'm looking forward to seeing this weekend is obviously Calvin Ramsey's had a lot of plaudits from his going forward side of things with the balls he's been putting into the box. But Jota, he's had an impressive start to his Celtic career. He's predominantly playing down the left side. Him and even Lil Abada on the other wing, how Aberdeen's young fullbacks deal with what has been a rather impressive Celtic wing play, because like you said, they've been getting balls into the box. Well, if Aberdeen can nullify that threat, we're halfway to giving ourselves a chance.
I have to say, Jota, right up until the Dundee United game, Jota's best performance was probably away at Betis, and that was when he played on the right-hand side as opposed to playing on the left-hand side. It's quite interesting seeing someone who's right-footed playing on the left. It's sort of, I don't think it's his natural side as much as he wants to play out there. He can put a ball in with his left, and it's been fairly decent, especially as we say the game against Dundee United. But I feel as if the both him and Abada, if they're players that don't get into a game after 10-15 minutes, you've lost them. They're not someone who can get up to speed with the game. They can become luxury players in that aspect. What Abada does best is coming in and cutting in from the wide area, beating his fullback and getting on the end of crosses. He's now scored 6 goals this season, and I think most of them, probably with the exception of the goal that he scored against St Mirren, is actually coming across and cutting across his man to get it at the back post.
Yeah.
And that's something that Mackenzie, who'll be playing it up against him, will have to watch out for, is that sort of dart and run. Now, Mackenzie might say, well, that's the centre-half's job, and the centre-half will say that's Mackenzie's job. That's where Abada can cause trouble for the Aberdeen backline.
And I suppose, sorry to interrupt you mid-flow there, Colin, but I suppose the interesting thing from an Aberdeen point of view, the way you're speaking about the way Liel Abada's worked and grabbed his goal, our left-sided centre-back is actually Ross McCrory, who is not an out-and-out centre-half. So I suppose when you're speaking about how well Liel Abada's done, maybe Ange's thinking that is an area of possible exploitation from a Celtic point of view.
It very much could be. Having watched Celtic, a lot of their attacks come down that left-hand side this season. Whether it be, Taylor before he was injured, and then we've seen Juranovic play out there and he get injured. There's a bit of a trend coming here. We've even seen Bolingoli come back. Now, nobody ever thought that would have happened in a Celtic jersey. But I think as it stands, going into the game on Sunday, I think Liam Scales might get a chance to play. And I have to say, I've been impressed with Scales. Even in the sort of 15-20 minute performance that he had against Raith Rovers coming off the bench, he's tall, he's quick, he looks to get down that left-hand side. If anybody saw any of Shamrock Rovers' performances in the Europa League this season, you saw the impact that he can have. He's very attack-minded, but very sturdy at the back as well. He reminds me a lot of Charlie Mulgrew in the aspect that he could probably slot into that centre-half position where he has played, but he looks every bit as comfortable on the wing as well. So there is a lot to be said about having someone with that versatility, especially if you come up against an Aberdeen side whose first thought will be to attack Celtic, which means you can sit a bit deeper. You can rely on the likes of Scales to help out the two centre-backs as well. And that's why I think he should be the one that gets given the jersey on Sunday. Yeah,
and the Icer there getting all excited in the background, and your thoughts from your Celtic lineup.
Do you know what?
At the weekend.
Do you know what the Icer usually, or the Icy as we call it down here, it only normally turns up at the weekend, but I believe it is the September weekend, so maybe he's trying to capitalise on it.
Yeah, extra revenue. And just to pick up a point, we've both drafted up team lines ahead of the game on Sunday. So before we go into, you'll give your Celtic team, I'll give my prospective Aberdeen team. So for those of you watching on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button if you're enjoying the content that both myself and Colin are providing ahead of the weekend's fixture. Leave us a comment as well with what you think your team should be. If you're a Celtic fan tuning in, do you agree with what Colin's said so far on all things Ange Postecoglou? And if you're an Aberdeen fan, what are your thoughts on Stephen Glass so far? And the point I really want to make is, I suppose, when you look at the press that teams have imposed on Celtic, looking at Dundee United in specific, and kind of a point you made about Aberdeen wanting to attack, we've seen Ryan Hedges come back from injury yesterday against St Mirren and the impact that he had. Austin Samuels has come in on loan from Wolves and has been deployed as a winger. And it'll be interesting to see if he gets a starting role on Sunday and we go with two out-and-out pacey wingers, even though one of them's not, and really try and exploit Celtic and kind of pin them in. But it would maybe isolate Christian Ramirez a little bit, and it'll be interesting to see if we maybe push Lewis Ferguson a bit further forward to kind of play off Christian Ramirez, a role that Lewis Ferguson has done in the past. Do you think if Aberdeen kind of played that pressing football, it's maybe something that we could have success against Celtic at the weekend?
I really think it depends who lines up in the Celtic midfield. Now, there is talk that Callum McGregor may be fit for the game, and he's been a massive loss for Celtic this season. He's taken over the Scott Brown role, and he's been playing that sort of sweeping defensive midfielder. And then James McCarthy was starting to come into a game, but picks up a knock at the weekend. So it all depends who's playing in there. If we've got Sorrow playing in there, absolutely, because Sorrow's more likely to get sent off than what he is to actually contribute to the team. His performances haven't been great at all season. If that's the case and you've got Celtic on the back foot, then that's the style that I think Aberdeen could adopt. if you're looking at having a team that's got Rogic, Turnbull, McGregor in there, then could they potentially be leaving themselves exploited at the back? You're then looking at Jota and Abada having a one-on-one with both Ramsey and McKenzie, and then whoever's playing through the middle trying to get the better of the two. You've got Turnbull and Rogic playing off him. Everybody knows what Rogic does up at Pittodrie. It just seems to be a place that I think he still comes into a lot of your nightmares, Glenn.
That just seems to haunt every Aberdeen fan constantly, and it's not just Pittodrie that he haunts us at.
But I mean, even he's not been at his best this season so far. But that's not to say that he won't up his game, just like we expect.
Well, it's a play.
Aberdeen to do so.
You say Aberdeen like to up their game against Celtic. Tom Rogic likes to up his game against Aberdeen.
I think he's still got that goal saved as a screensaver on his phone.
So do many of the Celtic support, unfortunately.
But no, I think if that is the case, it all depends on, and you're not going to know that ahead of time, but if you see Callum McGregor play on Thursday night against Leverkusen at any point, expect him to play on Sunday. And that's the way that Aberdeen should approach that game. Celtic can cause trouble, but they need the midfield general to do so. In that battle between whether it be Ferguson and Brown and McGregor and Turnbull, the winner of that could ultimately decide the game.
Yeah, I know we were just speaking about leaving a like on the video if you are watching on YouTube, and I suppose that little comment about Tom Rogic will quickly find a few dislike buttons. But if you are new around here and enjoying the content, just make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. And if you're tuning in for the first time via Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you're listening to the podcast as well, why not hit that follow button and put your notifications on so you get notified when all our new episodes are released. We're slowly coming up to 100 episodes, and we are working on a special guest for that 100th appearance. So stay tuned for more information surrounding that. And Colin, we said we were going to name our starting 11s. What we think the starting 11s will be. It's Ange Ball versus Glass Ball. I'll let you start. What is your... Let's say your predicted Celtic 11. I don't know if it's maybe or is this going to be the 11 you'd like to see?
I think this will be the 11 I'd like to see. Okay. I could probably throw the 11 out there that may start as well. So Joe Hart in goal. Now, I've not had the chance to speak about Joe Hart, but he has been a great addition to the Celtic side. I think a lot of fans are split on whether he would suit the style of football, but the leadership that he's shown since he's joined as well has been very, very good. We spoke about Celtic's defeat at the Spaghetti ad. Honestly, if it wasn't for Joe Hart, it could have been 3 or 4. He makes some fantastic saves that the likes of Barkas, Bain just weren't making last season. So Joe Hart in goal. We've only got one option, so it's Anthony Ralston at right back, Cameron Carter-Vickers, and then I think he'll go with Starfelt. I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen Welsh comes in, and it's really a toss of the coin between the two who would start.
Welsh left back then?
No, Welsh is a centre back.
Okay.
No, I'm saying it between the two of them.
Okay, sorry.
I think I would pick Starfelt, but I could see him going with Welsh. I don't know. That's a very 50-50 one.
Yeah.
At left back, I went with Liam Scales. We don't really have any other options. That's the thing. Greg Taylor's still out. I really can't see Bolly Bolingoli coming back in. So I think Scales is your option at left back. In the middle, I've went with McGregor, Rogic and Turnbull, and that's on the basis that McGregor is fit for the game. If not, it will probably be Sorrell, Rogic and Turnbull. Again, this is barring any injuries taking place on the game on Thursday against Leverkusen.
Yeah.
And then I've went with Abada, Jota and Giakoumakis up front.
Giakoumakis would be making his debut for Celtic if he doesn't on Thursday night, of course.
Yeah, so that would be Giakoumakis and Scales potentially in line for their league debuts at least.
And I suppose, based on the team that you've picked, a few of these players that have come to Celtic in the summer have played in that Old Firm derby earlier in the season, which you did lose. It's no problem. It's another away fixture, a ground that there will be an atmosphere unlike Ibrox, there will be a big vocal away support, getting behind the Celtic team. So there will be, a decent atmosphere, I'm sure, at Pittodrie on Sunday. Do you think these players, they'll be able to cope with that?
I don't think it will faze them. I don't think it fazed them at Ibrox. I don't think they were necessarily outplayed at Ibrox, to be perfectly honest. I think it did faze some of the younger boys at Tynecastle, but they have kind of faded out of the side. And then obviously it's like a home fixture anytime you go to the Spaghetti Ad. So it is kind of strange. This will be the first sort of away game where there is a Celtic support, but it's not a dominant Celtic support for an away game. Pittodrie's a great place to go. I mean, the atmosphere is always brilliant.
Yeah.
But and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, and I apologise to anybody I do offend here, but Aberdeen can go from being one of the loudest stadiums in the world to hearing a pin drop.
Yeah, no.
I don't know what it is. And that's not necessarily to say that it's maybe 1-0 to the opposition team. It just seems as though sometimes just after kick-off, if the game's not settled in, you hear the old groaning and moaning, but there doesn't seem to be that vocal element behind the Aberdeen support, and it's something I know that the chairman has mentioned before. He's looking to get the Red Shed going. Yeah, well, I was going to say, that's something we've seen the implementation of this season. So the banter and I suppose rivalry that many come to expect at the fence might not be the same this year, as most of those fans have now moved to the Merkle stand behind the goal. And I think for me, obviously, we created brilliant atmospheres in the European home games, getting behind the team for large spells throughout those fixtures. And Sunday is going to be the first real domestic test for the Red Shed for me, and how much of a vocal backing can we give to the team on Sunday from that Red Shed. And like you said, if the game, if it goes 1-0 Celtic early on, or, first half, can we as a fan group stick with the team in the same way that, Motherwell Boys, Green Brigade, and others, supporter groups, I won't mention certain other ones, can give to their home side when they're playing at home as well. So big test, and a test for Stephen Glass. We've touched on Aberdeen coming in a poor vein of form. You've given your Celtic lineup. This is the lineup I'm kind of half expecting, but there's a few picks in there that I would like to see. Obviously, question marks around Joe Lewis and whether or not he should or shouldn't play. I think you've got to play your most experienced players in these sort of fixtures. Joe Lewis, countless times against Celtic and Rangers, has pulled off wonderful saves and kept us in games against yourselves. I can remember certainly some games at Hampden in particular. So I'll go with Joe Lewis in goals. The back four, I don't see any changes from the weekend, despite us conceding 3 goals. So Calvin Ramsey, Bates, McCrory, and McKenzie filling in there. I don't think Declan Gallagher's quite got into his Aberdeen stride yet. So I don't know, kind of maybe the points you're saying there about the balls into the box. You said Starfelt, bread and butter for him. Is that more bread and butter for Declan Gallagher? But then him and Bates haven't formed a partnership yet so far their time in Aberdeen. So not really the sort of fixture I would like to test out a new centre-back pairing. Expect Scott Brown to fill in midfield. Don't see him being dropped for the weekend up against his former side for the first time. I'm really interested to see how he performs. We always used to raise his game, let's say. It's been the kind of word we've been using throughout this preview whenever he came up against Aberdeen. So let's see if he flies into tackles as much as he did whilst he, from an Aberdeen point, what we used to see when he was wearing the green and white. So just on that, Glenn, are you concerned about discipline so far this season? When I look at it, Aberdeen's picked up 14 yellow cards. Obviously, you mentioned Jenks getting sent off. Is that a kind of concern for you going into this game? Because I'm not sure who the referee is so far. I don't know who it is. Yeah. But, I mean, discipline can cost massively in these games.
Yeah, and it's a point we made actually in the review of the St Mirren game. Is our kind of lack of discipline or indiscipline this season, And it was a point we actually made on a previous show about Stephen Glass picking up as many bookings as he had already this season. So does that kind of filter down to the players? And I suppose it's really key. We've seen in games between Aberdeen and Celtic before there is tendencies for red cards in this fixture.
Yeah.
I remember, we spoke about that game where we beat you 2-1 the last time Aberdeen won at Pittodrie, but obviously one of the other famous victories that we had was, I think it was us that was down to 10 men when Paul Quinn headed home late on to be early in the season. I think that was the same season. And that's the game. Was that not the game you were referring to when the last time we actually kept a clean sheet against Celtic?
I think so. It might have been. Yeah.
So,
it was. Yeah.
These are the fixtures where we need to keep discipline. You look at the way Johnny Hayes flew into a tackle late on, game's not going your way, lucky not to get himself sent off.
What do you think on that? What's your thoughts?
That's 100% a red card.
I was thinking so too.
And, this is going to be the game where we need an experienced head, Scott Brown in particular, to step up and lead. There's been times, I've seen, murmurings from Aberdeen fans say, did Scott Brown go into hiding a bit? Where was that leadership example taken forward? And that's actually why I've dropped Johnny Hayes for this game. He started against Mirren, and I've gone with, to complete my midfield, Lewis Ferguson, who I've actually pushed a bit further forward. And I suppose with Teddy Jenks' red card kind of leaves a space open. I've seen some people maybe mentioning Dylan McGeouch's name, why he's not getting a run of games. But I'm going to go with Matty Longstaff, brought in from Newcastle, but then just not featured the last two games. Maybe not got up to the pace of Scottish football yet, maybe struggling a little bit, but is this going to be the game that we can see Matty Longstaff do something special in? And then to base on the fact that Celtic have maybe struggled against the press, struggled against a bit of pace this season, I'm going to have Ryan Hedges on one wing and then Austin Samuels on the other. Let's go at them early doors. Let's not sit back and hold anything back. There was a few times under Derek McInnes where we were often maybe a bit too cautious, especially at home against Celtic. And that cautious, the cautious approach cost us, whether, we've seen other teams when they're at home against Celtic go out and take the game to them. So that's what I'd like to see this Aberdeen side do. And then I've got Christian Ramirez, fresh off his goal at the weekend, leading the line.
A great header, that. That was a really good header, that.
A fantastic header, and it just shows what he can do when he gets the right service into the box. And I think with both Samuels and Hedges in that team on Sunday, we can get the right service to him and hopefully, exploit any weaknesses that Celtic's backline may have ahead of the weekend.
What about the mighty Jet?
And he should be put into the hangar and kept aside. I know you've been enjoying your glass puns, so there's a Jet pun for you.
Do you know, it was funny because we said off air after we recorded the last podcast together, and I said, do you know what? It's a kind of signing I can see Aberdeen making. And both you and Callum turned around to me and says, never in a million years. And then about 3 weeks later, it was confirmed that he'd signed for Aberdeen in a pre-contract.
Mm-hmm.
It's... I don't know what he offers to that Aberdeen side. When you look at Ramirez, he's 100 times the player that Jet is. It's a strange one. I think Aberdeen have been signing strikers recently and it's just never worked out for them ever since Adam Rooney left. Mm-hmm. And that's a big gap to try and fill. Ramirez looks as if he's probably the first one in a long time that could potentially do that. Mm-hmm. But again, what's that? 3 goals in the league so far this season?
3.
You're looking for a team like Aberdeen really needs someone that they can turn to that's going to score 15 to 20 goals a season, especially to try and finish third.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is 3. Dundee United, Ross County, and then St Mirren at the weekend there. So 6 goals in all competitions so far this season for the American number 9. And it'll be, there's so many kind of facets to this game. Poor runs of form, long, periods of times without victories, away from home in general, without a victory, if you're looking at an Aberdeen point of view. Both teams looking a bit frail defensive, both sides loving the possession football and creating plenty of chances. It's going to be an interesting game. There's a lot of narratives to it. both managers under pressure from media, elements of the support. It's certainly going to have lots to dissect, hopefully, when we come back next week to pick the bones out of whatever the result may be and wherever, I suppose, that leaves both sides going into the international break. Colin, as ever, it's been a pleasure to chat all things Celtic and, in general, looking ahead to what is probably going to be an exciting fixture this weekend, or hopefully an exciting fixture.
Yeah, thanks once again for having us on. Again, I wish you all the best, apart from in the games against Celtic this season. But no, as I said, should be a good game. And if you haven't already done so, leave a like and subscribe. There's some great content coming out from both Glen and Calum this season. Yeah,
I appreciate that, Colin. And Colin, of course, can be found on A State of Mind, regular contributor to A Celtic State of Mind, but also the State of Scottish Football show, which I've been lucky enough to be a part of. I do Monday nights. Colin, you do Friday nights as a regular.
Yep.
Great content, and it's not Old Firm focused. It's all of Scottish football, covering all the hot topics. So again, if you are watching on YouTube, head over to A State of Mind and subscribe there if you want to get more in general Scottish football content. And as always, we're on Twitter at @RTG_podcast and Instagram rtg.podcast. Thanks very much for tuning in. Let's hope finally next week we are speaking about a win. It's been far too long.
Tell me about it.
Well, not as long for you, but thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses.